Captain Lyra Valen stood on the bridge of the Stellar Phoenix, her hands tightly gripping the command chair, eyes locked onto the holomap flickering in front of her. The map was a web of battle lines, enemy territories, and hidden coordinates she had spent months trying to decipher. The last known coordinates of the ancient warships were here, within the dark craters of the moon. If she was right, humanity's salvation lay buried in that dust and rock, waiting to be unearthed. Status report, Lyra barked, her voice carrying the weight of years of oppression. Scanning the area, Captain, her communications officer, Lieutenant Arisvos, replied. His pale face lit by the dim red glow of the control panels, his fingers moving with practiced precision over the console. No Dominion ships within a 5-light-year radius. It's a ghost zone. Lyra nodded, barely acknowledging the relief she felt. They had been hunted for years. The Celestial Dominion, a vast and merciless empire, had wiped out entire colonies, leaving nothing but ruined cities and forgotten memories in their wake. Earth's resistance had been forced to fight in the shadows, using guerrilla tactics and hit-and-run operations. But Lyra knew that was not enough. She needed something more, something that would give humanity the strength to fight back. "We're heading into the moon's surface," Lyra ordered. "Prepare for descent." As the Stellar Phoenix dropped out of hyperspace and approached Earth's satellite, the crew fell into an anxious silence. Lyra knew that if they were discovered now, it would mean the end for them, and for humanity. Her mind raced through the countless possibilities, each one more grim than the last. What if they were too late? What if the ancient warships had already been claimed by the Dominion? The landing was swift, the ship touching down on the moon's barren surface with barely a tremor. The moon was a graveyard of human ambition, abandoned bases, forgotten outposts, and now, it seemed, the final resting place of humanity's last hope. Lyra stood from her chair, gathering her team in the ready room. A dozen of her most trusted soldiers, all hardened by years of combat, now looked to her with unwavering trust. "Listen up," Lyra's voice rang out, slicing through the murmurs. "We've been handed an opportunity. These ships were built long before the Dominion set their sights on Earth. They're old, but they're powerful. And they're the key to breaking the Dominion's stranglehold on this galaxy. We're not leaving here without them." Her second-in-command, Commander Jackson Reed, nodded grimly. "The ancient fleet, if those ships are what you think they are, Captain, we could punch a hole straight through Dominion defenses. We'd be able to strike back hard." Lyra's eyes narrowed as she focused on the task at hand. "Exactly. But we need to move quickly. We don't know how much time we have before the Dominion realizes we found something. Voss, open the encrypted files from the intel we gathered. Let's see what we're dealing with." A series of holographic data streams flickered into the air, displaying ancient schematics of the warships. The designs were alien, sleek, advanced, and unlike anything the Dominion had ever fielded. Each ship had weapons capable of tearing apart entire fleets, but it was the propulsion system that caught Lyra's attention. The ships were powered by a mysterious energy source, one that could turn the tide of the war. "Captain, you need to see this." Voss's voice was low, almost hesitant. Lyra walked over, her boots clicking against the metal floor. The image before her showed an immense structure deep within the moon's core, a hidden armory, a vault that housed the fleet. But as she studied the data, a chill crept down her spine. It wasn't just the fleet that lay beneath the surface. There were also weapons, unimaginably powerful ones, that the Dominion would stop at nothing to claim. "We have to move fast," Lyra said, her voice now tight with urgency. "If we don't take these weapons, the Dominion will." Outside, the eerie silence of the moon hung heavy in the air, as if the very stars were watching. This was more than just a raid. This was humanity's first real strike back against the Celestial Dominion. And Lyra Valen wasn't about to let it slip through their fingers. "Prepare for a ground assault. We're digging them out." The Stellar Phoenix remained perched on the moon's dusty surface, a silent sentinel as the human crew assembled in the armory. Lyra stood before her team, the tension palpable in the air. The data Voss had uncovered was promising, but it was incomplete. She knew the task ahead would be dangerous, not just because of the Dominion's inevitable response, but because of the unknowns. The secrets beneath the moon's surface were older than Earth itself, and who knew what they might uncover in the shadows. "Ready for insertion," Commander Jackson Reed said, his voice calm but tinged with the usual edge of someone used to making life-or-death decisions. Lyra nodded. "We move out in 20 minutes. We'll take the access tunnels, and then breach the armory. I want full security, no mistakes." Voss, the ever-vigilant communications officer, stepped forward. "Captain, there's something else. While we've been scouring the intel, I found some evidence pointing to a Dominion presence on the moon. Not a large force, but enough to be concerning. They may already know we're here." Lyra clenched her jaw. Of course they would have noticed. Nothing in this fight came without risk. "Keep monitoring the network. If anything changes, you'll be the first to know." The crew moved quickly, preparing for their descent to the moon's surface. Lyra had done this before, leading covert raids against Dominion supply lines. But this felt different. This time, they weren't just stealing supplies. They were digging up the heart of humanity's future. Every second counted. As they descended into the shadowed craters, the low rumble of the excavation equipment filled the air. The team set up a perimeter. The heavy clang of boots against the rocky ground a stark contrast to the quiet vastness of the moon. Lyra's eyes scanned the horizon, her hand instinctively resting on the grip of her sidearm. This was uncharted territory, both in the literal sense and the strategic one. Then came the unexpected. A faint flicker in the distance caught Lyra's attention. The signal came through Voss's headset first, a jumbled transmission, distorted but unmistakable. It was a human voice. "Lyra, this is Convec, former officer of the Dominion." The transmission crackled, and Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "Convec," she repeated, almost incredulous. "What are you doing here?" "Helping you," the voice answered, and a figure stepped from the shadows, barely visible against the stark gray of the moon's surface. A tall humanoid figure, with sharp features and the dark, battle-worn armor of a Dominion officer. But his eyes, those were different. They were full of something Lyra had seen only in the eyes of the oppressed: defiance. The team froze, weapons at the ready, but Lyra held up a hand. "Stand down." Convec raised his hand slightly in a gesture of peace, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know you don't trust me. You shouldn't. But I've seen what the Dominion has done to this galaxy. I was there when they burned your colonies to ash. I watched as Earth was forgotten. But I don't serve them anymore." The words hung in the cold air for a long moment. Lyra knew the truth. Those who defected from the Dominion weren't always the most trustworthy. But something about Convec's presence, the way he carried himself, made her reconsider. The Dominion was a machine, and the machine relied on its officers. To have one on their side, especially one who knew the inner workings of their most powerful weapons, was an asset beyond value. "I don't need a traitor in my ranks," Lyra said, her voice cold, her stance firm. "But if you're telling the truth, we could use someone who knows their tactics. Convince me." Convec didn't flinch. "I'm not asking for trust," he said, his voice steady. "I'm offering you the one thing the Dominion never expects: knowledge. The fleet you're seeking, the weapons, it's all part of a larger plan. The Dominion isn't just a military force. They're a system, and I know how it works. I can help you tear it apart from the inside." For a moment, silence fell between them. Lyra glanced over at her team, reading their reactions. Trust was a fragile thing, but desperation had a way of forging alliances where none had existed before. "We'll take you with us," she said, finally breaking the silence. "But know this, Convec, one wrong move, and you'll answer for it. This isn't about loyalty to me. It's about loyalty to humanity." Con nodded solemnly. "Understood." With the uneasy alliance formed, Lyra and her team pressed onward. The shadows of the moon's surface seemed deeper now, and every corner they turned carried the weight of uncertainty. But with convex guidance, they navigated the labyrinth of ancient tunnels that led them closer to the armory. As they neared the entrance, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A loud roar echoed from above, followed by the unmistakable sound of Dominion warships closing in. The battle for humanity's future had already begun, and Lyra knew it would not be an easy fight. But with the strange new alliance of traitor and soldier, the first spark of rebellion had been lit, and nothing could stop it now. The tension was suffocating. The ground beneath Lyra's boots trembled as the low hum of Dominion warships echoed overhead. The ground crew, her most trusted soldiers, along with the newly allied convex, moved swiftly through the moon's darkened passageways. The armory they sought was near, buried deep within a series of ancient, twisted tunnels that predated even the first human colonies on the moon. Lyra's mind raced. Despite the uneasy alliance with convex, her instincts told her to stay vigilant. The Dominion officer had information about the fleet, humanity's last hope. But could he be trusted? The very act of defecting meant that Khan was a man torn between loyalty and survival. Still, his knowledge of the Dominion's inner workings could prove invaluable. As they rounded a corner, the light from their portable torches flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly across the walls. The ancient architecture of the tunnel had a haunting quality to it, a reminder of a time before Earth had been ravaged by the Dominion. The moon's surface, long since abandoned, had once been a beacon of human ambition and expansion. Now it was a silent graveyard, its only purpose to house secrets lost to time. "How far?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper, though there was no one else to hear them. Convex, his sharp eyes scanning the environment, responded with grim certainty. "The armory is just ahead. We're close, but we must be careful. The Dominion set up hidden security systems here long ago. I can guide you, but the last thing we need is to trigger an alarm." Lyra nodded. They had no idea what kind of defenses lay ahead, but failure was not an option. "Everyone, stay sharp," Lyra ordered, as she motioned for her team to move forward. The air felt colder as they neared their destination, the walls adorned with strange symbols and warnings, the origins of which none of them could decipher. Voss, who was at the rear of the group, spoke up, his voice tense. "Captain, I'm picking up something. The signal's faint, but there's a disturbance. I think it's coming from the entrance." A pit formed in Lyra's stomach. They couldn't afford to be detected, not now, not when they were so close. The Dominion must have a backup system, ready to trigger a lockdown at the slightest hint of intrusion. "Voss, stay on it," she said. "Report back if it changes." As they approached the sealed vault doors, Convex stepped forward, examining the intricate lock mechanism embedded into the cold steel. "I can open it," he said, his voice low but confident. "It's a Dominion system, but I was once part of the team that designed these vaults. Let me work." The crew watched warily as Convex began to interface with the vault's access panel. His movements were swift, precise, his fingers dancing across the console like he was born to manipulate the machine. Lyra kept a close eye on the surroundings, waiting for the inevitable explosion of alarms that would signal the Dominion's response. Suddenly, the door's massive metal slab groaned as it began to slide open. The hollow sound echoed down the tunnels, filling Lyra with a momentary sense of victory. But that feeling was short-lived, as an explosion of light and sound ruptured the silence. The doors slammed open with a final metallic screech, and before Lyra could react, a squad of Dominion shock troops emerged from the shadows, weapons raised. The cold, emotionless faces of the soldiers revealed no surprise, only the harsh intent of execution. The Dominion had anticipated their arrival. "Captain, look out," Reed shouted, pulling Lyra behind a crumbling support beam as blaster fire ripped through the space. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as the battle erupted in a fury of flashing lights and deafening noise. Her team returned fire, weapons locked in a deadly rhythm of destruction, but the Dominion shock troops were disciplined, precise, and their armor seemed impervious to the firepower of Lyra's soldiers. She glanced toward Khan Vec, who was already moving forward, his own energy rifle in hand. The defector's face was a mask of determination, his years of training under the Dominion's brutal regime shining through. "Stay low," Khan shouted over the din of combat. "I'll disable their weapons." He charged into the fray with unexpected speed, moving with an intensity that caught Lyra off guard. He was a different kind of warrior, one who knew how the Dominion thought, how they moved. His strikes were calculated, disabling enemy soldiers with precision. "Cover him," Lyra barked, pushing forward, her rifle at the ready. She felt the weight of every decision she'd made pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about the fleet anymore. It was about proving that humanity could still stand, could still fight back. As the battle raged on, Lyra's team pushed forward, breaking through the Dominion ranks. Khan Vec's knowledge of their tactics was the key they needed, but it wasn't enough. The Dominion shock troops were relentless, and more were on the way. "We've got to move," Lyra yelled, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're not leaving without those ships." Reed nodded, locking eyes with her. "Let's finish this." The team surged forward, bursting into the heart of the armory, and before them stood rows upon rows of ancient warships, humanity's last, long-forgotten weapons. But the battle was far from over. The armory was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. The room stretched out into the darkness, the flickering lights casting an eerie glow on rows upon rows of warships. Some were ancient, relics from an era long forgotten, while others appeared far more modern, though still shrouded in mystery. Humanity's last hope was now within reach, but the Dominion wasn't going to let them take it without a fight. Lyra's eyes scanned the room, her heart racing as she gave quick orders to her team. "Voss, get those systems online. We need to launch these ships now. Reed, cover the entrance. The Dominion will send reinforcements. Khan, you know the layout here. Get us into the command center." Khan Vec, his face still marked by the battle they had just fought, gave a sharp nod. "Follow me." The team moved quickly, their weapons trained on every corner of the massive armory. The air was thick with tension, and the distant sound of Dominion reinforcements closing in kept Lyra's senses sharp. She could feel the weight of the decision they had just made pressing down on her. This was no longer just a mission to recover humanity's last ships. It was a desperate fight for survival, and every moment counted. As they reached the command center, the atmosphere grew even heavier. The center was illuminated by a cold, blue glow, a far cry from the sterile white lights of the stellar Phoenix. The walls were lined with old, flickering screens, displaying technical data Lyra could barely comprehend. It was clear that the Dominion had repurposed this place long ago, turning it into their own fortress. Lyra turned to Khan. "Get us access. We need to unlock the warships." Khan moved with purpose, his hands flying over the control panels as he bypassed security systems. His knowledge of Dominion technology was invaluable. Lyra watched as he worked, his eyes scanning the data feeds with a practiced intensity. She could feel the seconds slipping away, the pressure mounting with each passing moment. They didn't have much time before the Dominion forces found them. Suddenly, the alarm blared, loud and insistent, filling the room with a shrill, piercing sound. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. The Dominion had found them. "Get to the ships," Lyra shouted. "Now." Reed's voice crackled over the comms. "They've breached the outer perimeter. We have less than 5 minutes before we're overwhelmed." The team scrambled into action, racing towards the rows of ships. Lyra felt the weight of the responsibility press down on her shoulders. These ships, these ancient weapons, were humanity's last hope. If they didn't get them out of the armory and into space, the Dominion would finish what they had started and crush Earth once and for all. Convex voice cut through the chaos. The ships are powered up, but they won't launch automatically. We need to manually activate them. Can you do it? Lyra asked, already moving toward the nearest vessel. I can, Khan said with confidence, his voice steady amidst the growing chaos. But you'll have to hold them off long enough. Lyra nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. There was no room for error. She couldn't afford to lose this chance. The sound of Dominion troops rushing through the corridors echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. Lyra could feel their presence closing in. These soldiers were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had eradicated every last human who dared to resist. Reed, Lyra barked. Hold them off. Everyone else with me. The team spread out, forming a defensive perimeter around Khan as he worked to manually power up the warships. The air crackled with energy as the first Dominion soldiers burst into the command center. Lyra's gunfire echoed through the room as she opened fire, her shots precise, taking down the first wave of soldiers before they could react. But the Dominion didn't retreat. They pressed forward, relentless in their assault. Keep pushing, Reed shouted, firing his weapon from behind cover. The team was holding their ground, but the Dominion's reinforcements kept coming, pouring into the room from all sides. Lyra's pulse raced as she looked over her shoulder at Khan. He was still working furiously, his hands flying over the control panel. The tension in the room was unbearable. The sound of blaster fire, explosions, and the growl of Dominion soldiers filling the air. They couldn't afford to lose their focus, not now. Suddenly, a loud hum filled the room as one of the warships powered up, its engines coming to life with a thunderous roar. The ship's weapons systems activated, its shields humming to life. It was a sign. Humanity's first victory in this fight for survival. 1 down, 7 more to go. But the fight wasn't over. Dominion shock troops poured into the room, their weapons trained on Lyra and her team. Lyra gritted her teeth, knowing they had no choice but to fight for their survival. Reed, fall back. We have the ships. Lyra yelled. She didn't need to say more. Reed understood the order. They had to hold the line just a little longer. The warships were their ticket out, and they weren't leaving without them. Lyra fired, her shots precise, her resolve unshaken. They had to push forward, to survive. The battle for the future of humanity had only just begun. The air in the command center was thick with the smell of ionized metal and burned ozone. Dominion soldiers fell one after another, but for every one Lyra's team took down, another seemed to take their place. The noise of the battle, the clashing of weapons, the crackle of energy shields, and the desperate shouts of her soldiers drowned out everything else. There was no time for doubt, no room for hesitation. The warships were humanity's last chance, and they had to get them into space. Lyra's heart raced as she watched Khan Vec, sweat dripping down his forehead, continue working furiously at the control panel. His hands moved with mechanical precision, bypassing security systems, unlocking ship after ship. The hum of each one coming to life was like a small victory, but Lyra knew it wasn't enough. The Dominion was relentless, and they had little time before reinforcements overwhelmed them. We've got 2 ships online. Khan shouted over the noise of the battle, his voice tight. I need 5 more minutes to power up the rest. 5 minutes. We don't have that long. Reed's voice was strained, but his tone was steady as he fired off shots, picking off the Dominion soldiers advancing from every angle. We've got at least 2 squads coming down the hall. We need a plan. Lyra's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that could give them an advantage. The walls were lined with tactical screens, many of which were flashing with data and live feed from the outer perimeter. The Dominion had set up checkpoints around the armory, blocking every possible exit. They were trapped. Then an idea sparked in Lyra's mind. Something desperate, but it was their only shot. She turned to Reed and Khan. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We're going to them. Reed raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What do you mean? We're taking the fight to the Dominion. We break through their lines, buy Khan enough time to finish powering up the ships, and get the hell out of here." Khan's eyes flashed with understanding, though he knew the risk. "You'll need to create a diversion. I can't do this with them breathing down my neck." Lyra nodded sharply. "We'll make it happen. Reed, you and I will hold the front. Khan, get the ships ready. We'll make sure you have the time you need." With a quick exchange of glances, the team moved into position. Lyra and Reed moved toward the door, taking up position behind a stack of overturned crates, their weapons trained on the incoming wave of Dominion soldiers. The rest of the crew scattered, setting up in strategic locations to create a crossfire, forcing the Dominion into a funnel where they could be picked off. The first wave hit hard. Lyra's rifle roared to life, cutting down soldiers with expert precision. Reed followed suit, his aim as sharp as ever, making every shot count. The battle was chaotic, the room filled with flashes of blinding light as their weapons clashed with Dominion tech. The air hummed with the energy of their struggle, each moment a fleeting chance at survival. "We're not done yet," Lyra shouted as she fired a burst that sent a Dominion soldier flying across the room. She motioned for Reed to fall back. "We need to clear the way. Now." The two soldiers retreated, falling back to the next defensive position as they created a path through the advancing enemy. Lyra knew they couldn't afford to be overwhelmed. The longer the Dominion held them off, the less chance Khan had of getting the ships online. As they moved back toward the central chamber, Lyra could hear the hum of the warship's engines building in the background, growing louder with every passing second. Khan was close, but he wasn't done yet. The Dominion forces were pushing hard, cutting off their retreat. The clock was ticking. "We're almost there, just a little longer," Khan shouted from the control panel. Lyra didn't answer him. She couldn't afford the distraction. Instead, she focused on the enemy forces advancing down the corridor. There were more of them than she had hoped. Too many to take down in one wave. She needed a plan. Without thinking, she activated the manual override for the armory's auxiliary weapons system, opening a hidden compartment in the ceiling. A rain of grenades dropped into the room, exploding with a deafening blast, sending shockwaves through the Dominion ranks. The blast disoriented their attackers, throwing them into disarray and buying Lyra and her team precious moments. "Go!" Lyra yelled, motioning for her team to move. "We've got the opening." The team moved as one, sprinting toward the ships. The warships were ready now, their engines humming as their launch sequences initiated. The Dominion forces regrouped quickly, but Lyra's team was already boarding the ships, securing their places in the cockpit. Khan moved with them, his experience invaluable as he made sure each ship was properly configured for launch. Lyra slid into the pilot's seat of the lead ship, her heart pounding in her chest. Ready to launch, she called out to her team, knowing the danger wasn't over. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she could see the promise of victory. The ships were humanity's final hope, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. With a final, deafening roar, the ships began to lift off from the ground, tearing through the air as they punched through the armory's outer defenses. Lyra's breath caught as she felt the ship's hull vibrate under the pressure, the vast expanse of space opening up before them. They had made it, but the battle was far from over. Now they had to face the true might of the Dominion, on their own terms. Lyra's hands gripped the flight controls tightly as the warship surged upward, leaving the armory's atmosphere behind. She could feel the immense power of the engines thrumming beneath her as the ship tore through the skies. Outside the cockpit, Earth's surface fell away, the swirling clouds and fractured landscapes shrinking with every passing second. The cold vacuum of space awaited them, an inhospitable expanse that would be the final battleground in humanity's desperate fight for survival. "Status report," Lyra barked, her eyes scanning the displays. The ship's systems were still coming online, but she needed confirmation from the rest of the team. "Khan's ship is green." Reed's voice came through the comms, his tone sharp. We're all clear on this end. Lyra's relief was short-lived. Outside the ship, the darkness of space stretched out before them, but it wasn't empty. The Dominion fleet was already in motion, its massive warships flanking the vast stretch of the space station in the distance. Their ships were a cold, metallic reflection of the Dominion's ruthlessness, a stark contrast to the human ships now rising toward the heavens. "They're coming for us," Khan's voice crackled. "I'm detecting multiple Dominion warships moving into position. They know we're here." Lyra's jaw tightened. She had expected as much. The Dominion would never let humanity's escape go unchallenged. "We're not running," Lyra said, her voice low but filled with defiance. "We're taking the fight to them." Reed chuckled darkly over the comms. "You don't give up, do you?" "Not while there's a chance to win," she replied, her grip on the controls tightening. "Prepare yourselves. It's time to show them what humanity is capable of." The ship's systems hummed as the weapon systems powered up. Lyra's eyes flicked to the HUD, tracking the approaching Dominion ships. The first wave would be on them in moments. She wasn't about to let them intimidate her. They had humanity's final weapon, the warships that had been hidden for centuries, and now it was their turn to use them. "Reed, target their lead ship," Lyra commanded. "Khan, assist him. I'll take care of the rest." Her crew responded without hesitation. Reed's ship fell into formation beside hers, while Khan's followed closely behind. The three ships moved as one, an unspoken unity driving them forward. They had no time to waste. The Dominion would not give them a second chance. As the first Dominion ship came into range, Lyra activated her ship's primary weapons. A barrage of energy blasts erupted from the cannons, slamming into the shields of the approaching vessel. The enemy ship staggered under the assault, its shields flaring bright against the darkness of space. But the Dominion weren't going to give up so easily. "Shields holding at 80%, Khan reported, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding. "But they're sending reinforcements." Lyra's heart raced as a second Dominion warship appeared on her sensors, and then a third. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. The odds were not in their favor, but Lyra refused to let that stop her. "Focus fire on the lead ship," Lyra ordered again. "We take out their command, and the rest will crumble." Reed's voice came through the comms, steady and focused. "Aye, Captain. On your mark." Lyra's eyes narrowed, tracking the enemy ship's movements. It was larger than the others, its sleek, angular shape betraying its status as the flagship of the Dominion fleet. Its weapon systems were formidable, but Lyra knew she could outmaneuver them. She just needed the perfect moment. The tension in the air was palpable as the two fleets closed the gap. The Dominion fired first, sending a volley of plasma bolts toward Lyra's ship. She deftly maneuvered, dodging the blasts with expert precision, but she knew it wouldn't be long before the enemy would overwhelm them. "Ready?" Reed said, his voice steady. "Whenever you're ready, Captain." Lyra exhaled slowly, taking a steadying breath as the distance between them and the flagship closed. She needed the perfect shot. As the enemy ship fired again, Lyra pulled the trigger, unleashing a barrage of her own. The missiles streaked through space like deadly comets, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Khan's voice was laced with tension. The missiles slammed into the Dominion flagship, their explosive force tearing through its shields and then its hull. The ship shuddered violently as flames erupted across its surface. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she saw the explosion rip through the enemy vessel's core, sending it into a spiraling descent toward the empty abyss of space. The remaining Dominion ships faltered, their formation breaking as they scrambled to retaliate. "We've got them on the run," Reed said, a note of triumph in his voice. "Now's our chance." But Lyra wasn't celebrating yet. The battle had only just begun, and there were still many more Dominion ships out there, waiting to strike. "Stay sharp," Lyra commanded, her gaze fixed on the remaining Dominion fleet. "We've won the first round, but we're far from done." Prepare for the next wave. As the shattered remnants of the flagship drifted into space, Lyra felt the full weight of what they were about to face. The Dominion wouldn't give up so easily, but humanity had proven something today. They would not go down without a fight. And as long as she had breath in her body, she would continue to fight, no matter the cost. The remnants of the Dominion flagship drifted through space, a twisted wreck of metal and burning wreckage. But it wasn't the victory that Lyra focused on. It was the silence that followed. The vast emptiness of space felt suffocating after the barrage of fire, the adrenaline-fueled chaos of the battle. Her breath came steady, but her mind raced. The Dominion fleet wasn't beaten, not by a long shot. Lyra's sensors were already picking up the next wave. Reinforcements had arrived, and this time, they weren't pulling any punches. "We've got company." Khan's voice crackled through the comms. "5 more ships inbound, Captain. They've got heavy armor and full weapons loadouts." "I see them," Lyra said grimly, watching as the enemy ships appeared on her radar. The odds had shifted again, and now they were facing even more formidable enemies. "We can't outrun them," Reed added, his tone practical, the hint of a challenge in his voice. "And with shields down to 40%, we won't survive another full volley." Lyra's mind raced, her fingers moving instinctively across the ship's controls as she analyzed their options. Escape wasn't an option, and neither was simply fighting for survival. If humanity was going to make it out of this, they needed more than a chance at victory. They needed to strike a decisive blow, something that would break the Dominion's resolve once and for all. "We fight like we always do," Lyra said firmly, her voice a steady command. "We hit them where it hurts. This is our shot. Make it count." She had a plan. It was risky, insanely risky, but it was the only shot they had. Reed's voice came through, sharp and unhesitant. "What's the plan?" "We're going to split them up," Lyra said, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'll take the lead ship. Khan, you and Reed need to keep the others busy. I'll draw their fire." Khan hesitated, a rare moment of uncertainty in his usually stoic voice. "That's a suicide run, Captain. You're suggesting we split our forces in the middle of a fight." "We'll force them to spread out," Lyra explained, her eyes narrowing as she keyed in the necessary commands. "If they think I'm the primary target, they'll focus everything on me. You two can deal with the others while I pull their fire." Reed gave a short laugh, his voice steady as ever. "You don't take half measures, do you?" "No time for half measures," Lyra shot back, her eyes locked onto the enemy ships now closing in on them. She could feel the ship humming beneath her, ready for the coming storm. "We either do this right, or we don't make it out of here at all." Without another word, the team fell into position. Lyra's ship pulled forward, its engines blazing as it rushed toward the lead Dominion ship, leaving the others behind. She was doing exactly what she had promised, drawing their fire. The first volley came as expected, the deadly blue beams streaking toward her ship. She jerked the controls, weaving through the barrage with sharp, practiced movements, avoiding the worst of the enemy's attack while still making herself the target. "I'm all over their radar," Lyra said, gritting her teeth as the enemy ships locked onto her. "They won't take their eyes off me. Khan, Reed, now's your chance." Reed's voice was already responding, filled with a new intensity. "Engaging the second ship. Keep them busy, Lyra. We've got this." Khan's ship maneuvered alongside Reed's, both of them splitting off to engage the other Dominion vessels, while Lyra held her position at the forefront, a constant beacon for the enemy's fire. She could feel the tension building with each evasive move. The weight of it all was crushing, but she couldn't falter. The Dominion had to be pushed back. If they were going to have any chance at winning this war, they needed to strike now. Behind her, the other two ships were fighting with everything they had. Reed and Khan moved in sync, weaving and firing with deadly accuracy, distracting the Dominion long enough for their assault to be effective. Lyra caught sight of one of the Dominion ships breaking off to engage them. its firepower focused on Reed and Khan. She smiled grimly. "Good job," she muttered to herself as her ship's weapon systems locked onto the nearest enemy target. With a decisive push, Lyra unleashed the full might of her weapons. Energy blasts lit up the dark expanse of space as they collided with the Dominion ship, its shields flaring bright. The enemy ship rocked under the assault, but Lyra's focus never wavered. She could see the crackling energy around its shields, hear the whine of the weapons charging. This was it. "Target their engines," Lyra ordered, her fingers dancing over the controls once more. "Disable them. We need them to stay in range." The battle raged around her as the Dominion ships fired relentlessly, but Lyra's ship was a blur of motion, every move calculated, every shot with purpose. She knew her crew was doing their part. Khan and Reed were relentless, keeping the Dominion forces occupied, giving her the time she needed. The massive enemy ship ahead of her fired again, but this time, Lyra anticipated it. She turned her ship sharply, the cannons blaring as she hit the perfect angle. With a final blast, she watched as the Dominion ship's engines flared, then exploded in a brilliant display of fire and light. The ship was disabled, its weapons going offline. Another victory. But the fight was far from over. The remaining Dominion ships were regrouping, and they were already beginning to retaliate. "We've got more on the way," Khan warned, his voice taut with urgency. "They're not backing down." Lyra gritted her teeth. The battle was a dance of life and death, but humanity had just scored a crucial blow. The Dominion knew they were facing something they hadn't expected, a force determined to fight for their survival. Lyra's heart beat fiercely in her chest, and as the next wave of Dominion ships loomed large, she steeled herself for what was to come. They had made it this far. They wouldn't stop now. The void of space felt unnervingly quiet as the remnants of the Dominion fleet regrouped. Lyra's ship, still running on its battered systems, hovered in the middle of the chaos like a wounded animal daring its hunters to strike. The air was thick with anticipation. Humanity's last stand was about to reach its crescendo. Lyra sat poised in the cockpit, her knuckles white on the controls. Her eyes darted across the screen, tracking every enemy ship, every movement of their fleet. The Dominion had sent their best. There were no more tricks left to play. This was it. Either they won, or they were wiped out, their legacy forgotten in the cold depths of space. "We've got 8 remaining ships," Reed's voice came through, sounding just as focused as ever. "The battle's not over yet." Lyra's grip tightened, her heart pounding in her chest. But her mind was clear. There was no room for doubt. The war had been long, brutal, but they had fought for this moment. This one chance to secure humanity's future. They couldn't lose. "Khan, Reed," Lyra said, her voice resolute, "we need to finish this. We've already taken down their flagship, but they'll regroup and come at us harder. They won't stop until they wipe us out." "Understood, Captain," Khan replied, his tone unwavering as always. "We're ready." Reed's voice was filled with a determined edge. "Give the order. We'll take them down, one ship at a time." Lyra looked at her damaged ship, the flickering displays reminding her of all the times they had narrowly escaped death. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Humanity had already proven that they could stand up to impossible odds. Now they would push forward and end this war. "Let's make sure they regret ever crossing us," Lyra muttered to herself before keying in the final commands. In a moment of synchronized unity, the 3 ships surged forward together, leaving no hesitation in their wake. The Dominion fleet, still reeling from their previous losses, attempted to retaliate, but they were disorganized. The earlier defeat had shaken their resolve. Lyra saw it, the slightest crack in their unshakable facade. Khan and Reed took the outer edges of the formation, flanking the remaining Dominion ships while Lyra took the lead. They had one chance to catch the enemy off guard. It was a gamble, but the kind of gamble Lyra was used to. She knew what she had to do. "Focus fire on their command ship," Lyra ordered, her eyes narrowing as she locked onto their target. "We take down their leadership, and the rest will fall." The ships around her fired in unison, their energy beams cutting through space with deadly precision. Lyra's ship danced between the enemy's fire, her hands deftly guiding the craft through the onslaught. Her crew was with her every step of the way, their trust in her unspoken but firm. The Dominion ships retaliated, their weapons lighting up the space between them, but Lyra's ship was fast, always just out of reach. The battle was a blur of explosions and near misses, a chaotic ballet of destruction. Each shot fired, each ship destroyed, brought them closer to victory. As Lyra closed in on the Dominion command ship, her pulse quickened. This was the moment. The enemy's flagship was in her sights, its shields flickering as it struggled to defend itself. She didn't hesitate. Her hands were steady as she activated the weapon systems. The ship's guns fired with a deafening roar, sending a barrage of energy blasts straight at the heart of the Dominion ship. The first blast hit, shaking the enemy vessel, but the shields held. Lyra's eyes burned with intensity as she ordered another round. This time, the shots tore through the ship's defenses. The shields shattered, and with a single, well-placed shot, the flagship's engines went up in a violent explosion. Lyra watched as the Dominion command ship erupted in a cascade of fire and debris, the massive vessel losing altitude and spiraling toward the abyss of space. It was a sight that filled her with fierce satisfaction. The heart of the Dominion fleet was gone, but there was no time to celebrate. "Reed, Khan, finish them," Lyra shouted. "They're broken. It's time to end this." The remaining Dominion ships faltered, their formations disintegrating as their leadership crumbled. Reed and Khan moved in, cutting down their enemies one by one, while Lyra focused on the last vestiges of resistance. The remaining ships scattered, their crew disoriented and unsure of their next move. As the final Dominion ship was disabled, the vast silence of space returned, but this time it felt different. The battle was over. The fight for humanity's survival had been won. "Status?" Lyra asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Victory, Captain," Reed said, the relief in his tone evident. "We did it." Lyra closed her eyes for a brief moment, her shoulders sagging with the weight of exhaustion. The war was over. Humanity had fought, bled, and sacrificed for this moment. And now, they could finally breathe again. "Humanity's last stand is over," Khan said, his voice gruff but filled with pride. "We're free." Lyra looked out toward the stars, the vastness of space stretching endlessly before her. She knew the cost of their victory. The battle had been brutal, and many had fallen. But today, humanity had proven that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could ever extinguish their will to fight. They were ready for whatever came next, and the stars would remember their name.